Welcome back, everyone, to another glorious episode of Energy Bites. John Calfian here, my trusty co-host, Bobby Nealon.
What's up? What's up?
Calling in from Southwest Houston. I don't even know if
I'll be there later, but I just couldn't make the trip this early yet. So.
I don't blame. It ended up being easier since Michael's remote too. We've got our remote set up in the studio, so no worries. Bobby and I are gonna geek out over some database stuff later this afternoon. So excited to get to brain slap each other with that. But today we've got Michael Egan. He's the co-founder of Bunting Labs on the show today. Michael, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to talk more about maps and energy and how they work together.
All things maps. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the oil and gas industry, but we've got people who love maps. And between especially like geologists and the engineers, the landmen, it doesn't end. So if you can integrate with GIS, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I sent your site to our new customer service manager. He's a ex-geologist, and I sent it over to him. He's like, I've got a long list of questions. So I was like, don't worry. We'll get those questions asked for you. But Michael, why don't you just start off telling us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, where'd you go to school, how'd you ultimately end up at Bunting?
Yeah, so I'm from LA and went to USC, studied history, which, I guess we'll get into it. Doesn't really fit with a mapping AI company, but here we are. But yeah, so I was at USC, and one of my longtime friends, I've actually known him since elementary school. He went to MIT for college, and during the pandemic, we're all sitting at home. He texts me, I have a $1 billion idea. Do you want to work on a startup on it? And as a spoiler alert, it was not a $1 billion idea, but it got us into this, which was fun. And we started working on AI for predicting rent. And so I don't know if you've ever seen the company CoStar, but they sort of aggregate and sell commercial rent data. And we were making AI to try to predict what rent will be at a building and sell that to real estate developers. And it turns out they don't want the AI data, but it kind of got us into thinking about spatial data and thinking about sort of the power of it and how it is not really well utilized. And so we started sort of moving along with different ideas. And that's when we started speaking with sort of traditional GIS analysts. USC has, I learned after graduating, actually a very big GIS program. I think it's one of the only schools that offers a standalone master's degree in GIS. And so there's a big, alumni network of GIS analysts that I could go speak with. And they kept bringing up different problems that we thought we could solve with AI. So we, since about 2022, have been working on different AI models for GIS. And most recently, I've been working specifically with LLMs for GIS. That's a quick and dirty of how we got to history major, got into AI for GIS.
No, it's funny. One of the devs that we hired at the beginning of the summer, his minor is in history. So I feel like history is actually just a really good major or subject that more people need to have in their repertoire. But
so before we get too far into some of this other stuff too, like I want to go back to your $1 billion idea. Like, did that just get blown up because the market that you were training all this historical data on just like doesn't even hold water to what's happened since COVID?
So the model worked pretty well. To my co-founder's credit, we got it working pretty accurately. It's just that we found that real estate developers, real estate investors are either they work in a very sort of local area. So they'll work in like a neighborhood of a city and they know it inside and out and they don't need this data. Or they're more than happy to spend the extra money for the sort of ground truth data. This unit in this building rents for this much money. It's like on the lease, it's known. And they're willing to pay up for that. And so there wasn't really a middle market where they didn't want to spend, $50,000 a year on this super high end data, but they also sort of are investing outside of what they know. So it just turned out that people didn't really want it. And seeing as that was our sort of first venture into startups. We didn't really think much about ask what people want before we built it. We thought this is a good idea. Let's do it. And yeah, it just turned out that people didn't want it, but it was a good experience.
That's fair.
No, I mean, I think, I mean, to your credit, you guys didn't just stop and throw in the towel either. You pivoted. And I think that's most successful companies were something else when they originally started, right? Or they had a target in mind and that their thesis was wrong, but their solution had a space somewhere, right? And so I think that's big props to you guys for continuing and finding where the applications are, because obviously there's GIS data is literally everywhere, and so yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. The other thing I wanted to ask about was it says on your LinkedIn that you were in the fencing club, and I've had a very weird fascination with fencing since I was in middle school, and I saw it in the Olympics one time, and I was like, this is interesting. And actually on my commute, I drive by a fencing club here in Houston. And so it still kind of haunts me of is this something I want to try? Because it looks like it would be a lot of fun.
It's really fun. Yeah, it's, I would still be doing it now if I could. Maybe it's a pro and a con. So at USC, fencing is, I believe, the oldest club. And so it gets a lot of university funding. And normally you need to buy a lot of gear, I forget the terms, but there's a whole get up you get so you don't get stabbed with the sword. And then you got to buy the weapons. And it's a pretty pricey thing to sort of get into. But because it's so old and has so much funding, the club buys all this stuff. And so you don't actually need anything to start doing it. And so I never actually bought anything. And so now every time I think about getting back into it, it's I would have to buy all this stuff.
Barrier to entry.
I don't know that I like fencing that much, but it's very fun. If you can find a fencing gym or a fencing club that will let you borrow stuff, it is a really good time. It's very fun to, in fact, fight with swords. But it is as sort of, pirate-like as it sounds.
Yeah. It's a mixture of high level strategy with just brute force, and I kind of love the dichotomy of those, I think. But no, that's awesome, man. So let's get into it a little bit. What is Bunting Labs, and I know we'll probably talk about Mundi as well, but we'll kind of just start from there. Yeah.
So Bunting Labs is our company, and at the highest level, we're always looking for what the best way to integrate AI and GIS is. My co-founder, he studied AI at MIT, and so that's sort of his specialty, and we think we should make best use of that. So we're always looking for different things to do. We started with an AI for digitizing maps. This is, I think, it's been particularly interesting to geologists because, unless you did it very recently, most geologic maps are just PDFs. But if you want to work with the data, more than look at it, you need to digitize it, which is an absurd pain to do because of how complex these maps are. So we trained ourselves, because we started in about June of 2022. We trained ourselves a model that can digitize the boundaries of polygons. And so it can digitize, and we tested it, it can digitize a geologic map twice as fast than if you were to do it by hand. So we started with that. And then we also experimented with some other sort of AI for GIS applications. I know I saw you tried it out before we hopped on the call. We sort of tested making something that digitizes meets and bounds, which we got some interest from landmen. We sort of moved away from that. We found that LLMs might not be the best for doing this. They're very close, but it might not be perfect. We've made one for aligning maps. So if you have an old historic photograph or an old historic sort of drawn map, you can align it in a digital way. And then most recently, we've been working on LLMs for controlling GIS. So a lot of different things, but really just trying to figure out the best way to bring AI and GIS together.
Before we get deeper in this, because I know Bobby's got questions, Bobby, just recap what GIS is for people before we really go down this rabbit hole. I just realized that we've been using that that acronym.
The acronym.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's Geographic Information Systems, I believe is what it stands for. But I mean, it's tied to anything where you're mapping. Or plotting, values, or polygons or shapes on a map. Now it can get very, very technical really fast with the Earth's curvature and all these projections and all this kind of crap. So, but no, I mean, it's super useful. People love maps, love seeing it. They know how to interact with it. So, no, it's a huge space. And I'm definitely interested to see like how that integrates with like LLMs. Cause like, I think we've talked a lot about on here, large language models. And sometimes people think that those are a catch-all and they don't necessarily work great with, traditional data actually, like our time series data and so on. So I'm curious what the limitations are around, current AI LLMs with geologic data. Or sorry, geographic data.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. So we got into this. We started, I think, last November. We started seeing what LLMs can do, and I think, like, if you look on LinkedIn, and to a lesser extent, you look on Twitter or X or where, there's a lot of people who talk about LLMs sort of interacting with spatial data directly, and I think that sort of misses the point. So we work a lot with QGIS, which I imagine a lot of, especially US-based energy professionals are either they use ArcGIS or they, someone on their team uses ArcGIS. QGIS is sort of an open version of that. And
I was going to say, we're going to have a whole conversation about mapping libraries at some point during this.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that, but keep going.
Yeah. So we work on top of QGIS because it's all open, and QGIS is all sort of, you can program it using Python, and you can also do other GIS work with SQL. And so probably the two best languages that LLMs know are SQL and Python. I don't know if it's the two best, but it's extremely good at both of those because there's so much of it on the internet. And so we figured we don't need to have an LLM directly sort of interface with spatial data. We're working on having it do that, but you can get pretty far by just having it interact with QGIS and sort of turning requests into QGIS code, and then having 20 years of QGIS development. It works perfectly. Having QGIS interact with the spatial data. So there's this sort of middle layer that handles it for you. And I think by doing that, it makes it a lot easier to have the LLMs be pretty useful.
No, it's fascinating. And again, I'm sure like the wonderful people at Esri are working on some of the stuff probably in-house. But I mean, there's a lot of people who would love to not have to pay Esri for a lot of that. And, so, I mean, I think something like this that, can make people, really dangerous and very productive, rather is probably a better term, within a more free tool. And I guess that, what you're providing isn't necessarily free. I know it looks like Mundi is available to self-host if you want, but I'm sure that's, non-trivial in some ways. But
no, you just put it on a server, Bobby. That's all.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's super interesting, but I think it's a smart way to go about it where, again, you've got essentially what you're saying is like QGIS has all the context and understands, the requests that you want to ask of it, right? Or how to translate natural language into a request, whether it's reprojecting a map or points or all those kind of things. So no, it's very cool.
Yeah, any of the processing you would need to do, I guess there's a long tail of complex processing you can do, but say you want to find the intersection of two layers or something like that. QGIS already has code that does all of this. You just need the LLM to sort of use the right algorithm from it, which is very easy for it because it's all, again, it's all Python. So you don't actually have to have the LLM, I guess, work directly with the shapefile or whatever.
So it's kind of like almost kind of how text to SQL is currently working, where it's like you're using an existing software, that being the database in this use case, and then you essentially train or you upload the schema and the relationships and everything within that software, and then you give that to a model, and then it just does its thing, generally speaking. I assume that's why y'all went with ArcGIS, because of one, it's obviously open source, and then two, but it has all of those functions already built into it, so you're not having to sit there and fine tune a model to do stuff that already exists.
Yeah, exactly. QGIS has everything we need, and it's open, so we can, if we were to do this with Esri, it would we would have to like go through them and work with them, which nothing against them, but it's a lot easier to sort of experiment and move quickly when we can just sort of control it ourselves, and we can push stuff out. It just makes it faster for us to iterate.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's kind of like this line of demarcation-ish where I think they kind of blend together, but between, say, like Bunting Labs and Mundi, or like, I mean, like, so because it looks like you've got like some of these suite of tools that are built into QGIS or QGIS. But then you have Mundi, which is more of a full platform, kind of built, it sounds like built on top of QGIS. I don't know if we want to kind of talk about the differences there, and maybe we can talk about, it looks like you got about 4 major products, that work within QGIS, and I'd love to dive into each of those. So,
yeah, absolutely. I guess on the 4 products, we definitely have 4 products on our website. There's a wide range on how well they work. We just kind of put stuff out as soon as we think it might be useful. And we have a bad habit of not taking them down when we realize there are problems. But we can get into that after.
That's a good startup for you, though. Just ship it. Just
put it out. What's the worst that happens? It doesn't work. If you don't ship it, it also doesn't work. So there's, what's the difference? But in terms of Mundi versus our stuff in QGIS, around November of last year, when we were thinking a lot about LLMs, we realized that the LLM labs, OpenAI and Google, are moving so much faster than we ever could building our own AI and training our own AI, which we've done plenty of, but they just are, it's not even comparable, right? And the LLMs are so powerful that we just need to do it. And so we made an LLM in QGIS, and it worked pretty well, but it was kind of janky. And what we realized we had to do was, if we wanted the LLM to be the focus, we would need to sort of build a platform around the LLM where we can have more control sort of around the infrastructure of it. And then if we need to use QGIS, we then call into it. So the way instead of having the LLM in QGIS and have it work with your data there, Mundi, the LLM has access to QGIS. So if you have 2 polygons and you need to find the intersection, it then will call into QGIS, run the processing, and send the data back, which makes it just a lot easier for us to get the most out of the LLMs, which is sort of why we're moving in this new direction. It probably would be strictly better to be in QGIS just because there are so many people already familiar with those workflows, at least for people who are very experienced in GIS. But we think that it's more important to get the most out of the LLM, and you do that with your own platform versus building it inside of QGIS. But there's also what we're finding with Mundi is that it's very appealing to people who are not deeply experienced in QGIS. I don't know if you've ever opened ArcGIS or QGIS. It's a pretty daunting platform to get to use, to get used to.
There's a lot of knobs.
There's a lot of knobs, a lot of buttons. It can do anything you could possibly want, which leads it to being very complex. And we think having our own very sort of straightforward, simple platform, it's a map and a chat box. It also brings sort of the ability to do spatial analysis to people who aren't deeply experienced with GIS, who don't want to open ArcPro or open QGIS. Yeah,
and I guess that's what I was going to ask. Like, are you targeting, and maybe it's both or in some way, but are you targeting, are we going to be an amplifier for professionals, GIS professionals, that make, kind of like Cursor is for someone like me or even, John or whatever, where it's like, we generally can do some of the coding or a lot of the coding, but it's like, I can do it faster and maybe even better by putting some testing around my code that I wouldn't necessarily otherwise do and so on. Or is it targeted at, let's just say, all right, there's a reservoir engineer who, isn't great, is not a GIS professional, but knows what he wants from it. He's like, I want to know what wells, what line strings intersect, these counties or intersect, this, DSU map that I, plop on the map, and it's just making it easier for them to do those workflows.
Yeah, I think we're trying to have it be useful for both. And we sort of have now two sets of users. We have users who themselves are, very experienced with GIS, very experienced with spatial databases. Most commonly they'll be database geologists, and they could do all of this stuff themselves, in QGIS, in ArcGIS, but it's just much faster and easier in our platform, and so that's appealing to them. But then the other set are sort of firms where there's a lot of people who are not specifically GIS analysts, but they need to work with spatial data. So you might be like a consulting firm of some type, and you have a GIS team who manages a spatial database, and then a lot of consultants who are not GIS analysts but need to use this data to do whatever it is that they do. And so with our platform, they can explore the data more quickly. They can spend, less time looking through the database, writing SQL, more time finding the right data that answers the client's questions. And then once they know what they want, they can send it to the GIS team in QGIS or in ArcPro, and they can make a nice, pretty map out of it. But the consultant can spend more time sort of on the impactful work than, fiddling with QGIS knobs and writing SQL.
Okay, very cool. So, I guess with this, obviously we're Energy Bytes. Because GIS spans like all kind of industries, but how much exposure, it sounds like you've talked to some landmen. I'm curious how much exposure you've had to some energy workflows, and like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the most direct exposure we've had has been through the landmen. So before we started working on LLMs, sort of controlling the whole GIS, the first thing we wanted to do with LLMs was digitize legal descriptions. Obviously, it's a big problem for landmen, and that product itself.
It's downplaying it.
Yeah,
it really is. Like I was one of our projects. We pulled in a bunch of public data, and each asset has probably half a dozen to a dozen plats of some sort for each individual well.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, good. It's just map. And like for enterprise RAG, it's like, okay, I can tag this as a map for this asset, but not really doing much else with it until I saw your stuff. And I was like, oh, this makes this very interesting. If I can quickly digitize it, and then now it's digital, so I can actually use it on a map if I want to. Sorry to cut you off, but like we have so much paper data in our industry that like that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, is because there is a lot of need for this type of stuff.
Yeah. It the Plat Digitizer turned out to be a lot more complex than we wanted it to be. So we've kind of paused it. It works fine if you have a very straightforward, legal description. Go 100 feet, turn 20 degrees, whatnot. That works fine. But once you start getting into more complex stuff, once you start requiring other data, so whether it be the point of beginning is unclear. So the point of beginning is like start at the tree on the lot. I don't know where the tree is, or along the property boundary that belongs to the Jones family. Well, the LM. Neither the LLM nor I know what that means, and so we can't help with this. And that turns out, as you all know, that's a lot of them. And so it just turned out to not be too useful. But we got some exposure to landmen that way. Most of the exposure to energy has been through geologists, because as we trained this map digitization model, it turned out to be most useful for geologic maps. So almost everyone who uses it is a geologist. Digitizing old maps. And then now again with Mundi, a lot of the people most interested are geologists, just because they have, so much data, and it would be, it's so time consuming to work with, but LLMs make it a lot faster. So a lot of exposure to geologists and some exposure to landmen is sort of what we've seen from the energy sector.
what are the primary use cases outside of the energy sector, or what are your kind of most popular features there?
Yeah. So outside of it, it would probably be the what I was describing earlier with the sort of consultancies where you have consultants who are not GIS experts, and a big one we're seeing is transportation consulting. You need to figure out where to place a bus stop or something. That requires a lot of spatial data, and these transit planners are experts in that, but they should be spending their time thinking about sort of the client's questions and not messing around with the GIS. And we've seen a lot of interest from sort of GIS managers in these consulting firms who understand that there's a much better way that their clients could be working with the data, or their sort of end users in the firm could be using the data rather. And they're just not. But this LLM provides sort of a new way to get the most out of what they have access to.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the overarching trend with language models across every industry, right? Is it's a tool that empowers or democratizes data that you already have by letting people who don't, know how to code or speak whatever language it may be to have access to that. And I really do think that that's like the near term impact of whatever Gardner says.
Oh, I agree.
EY and all of them. That's like the boots on the ground impact that this is having today.
Right. I totally agree. There's always if the LM was better, it could help experts do more. But right today, it's good enough that it can help beginners go really far. I have a history degree, and with Cursor, I'm able to make their minor edits. But without it, I would have no idea, how to do it. I can write a very small amount of code, edit, the stuff we're working on. It just makes it a lot better. And it's not to say that it's not useful for, experts. It very interestingly. So before we started working on Mundi, we started working on an LLM inside QGIS, and most users that got are 10, 20-year veterans, GIS analysts. And it's helpful for them. But I do think that it's far more helpful for people who sort of are new to the industry, sort of work tangentially to it, and let them get into it too.
QGIS up because they're scared of it.
Yeah, if you already know how to do it, it makes you faster for sure, but it doesn't sort of unlock anything. It doesn't make you now able to do more than you could before. And it's good to be faster, but it's better to be able to do more than you could.
Now, how about one thing I'm thinking here is all right, let's say you've got web developers that, are not GIS folks, but maybe or would they be able to say, make a map in Mundi and then embed that in their application? Could they point to it and then that's the mapping server, almost I guess maybe we can start segueing into how does this integrate, say, with a map box or something similar, or is it a replacement for, or does it integrate with? Just curious on that side of it.
Yeah, so this is actually something we have been working on somewhat on the side as we've been working on Mundi. Our primary focus has been on working with spatial databases, but we have been making it so you can embed it in websites. And I think what is most interesting about this as it compares to other embedded map solutions is we want it to be very easy to embed a map and then have people sort of edit that embedded map more quickly. And so you could embed the map in a site or an app or whatever, but then you could also have this easy to use interface to change the data in it, add new data, just change what's displayed without having to also go open up Cursor, open up whatever it is you use to code and edit the map that way. It makes it a bit easier for non-technical people to edit the embedded map.
That's a great feature because I feel like it's probably because I'm an engineer, but anytime I see a data set, I'm like, okay, well, I want to do something with that data set. And then most of the time, the data for the data set is nowhere to be found. And so you're very limited a lot of the time. But I think that's an incredibly valuable feature, as small as that sounds. That's something that everyone ends up wanting to do at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, So Mundi, I guess they're all technically open source, but since Mundi is more of like a platform than the other ones, it feels different that we've made it open source. But we do want people to take it and sort of build on top of it, and make it their own. We've seen some very interesting applications of this already. Actually, right after we launched it, we found someone taking Mundi and using it to make like a custom map for like a fantasy world, which is very separate from any sort of commercial application. But it was cool for us to see that someone saw this platform and took it and used it to make something they wanted to make.
Build something.
Yeah, build something on top of it.
And I guess to that end, does the map have to fit in this, with a base map of the world? Because when I think a popular platform in oil and gas is Typico Spotfire, which is a BI tool, but it's got really strong GIS. But actually, within say a map chart in there, you can actually have one where it doesn't actually have a base map behind it, and that's actually how you can plot certain points in space, and create. I think people used to do ternary diagrams and stuff like that, within there where they'd put an image on the background, and then that was almost like the map, and then you could place things within there within a geospatial-ish kind of context. But I guess just thinking about that, does it have to be a map of the Earth or like a global view, or can it be just limited to a local region, or like you said, even this is in this fantasy world, you make up your own geography and topography and so on. So
yeah, I think it can definitely be changed, and I think it's very useful. So we default have I forget the actual libraries we use, but we have one that's just like an OpenStreetMap, Google Maps type, just vector based map. And then we have a satellite based map, but there's all kinds of things you can change it to. One of the it doesn't yet support it, but something we're looking at is bathymetry. And so I could totally see it would be useful to have some kind of base map that lets you sort of see, below the water, which I don't think either of our base maps currently would support. But yeah, there's a lot of different things you can change it to. I saw this a while ago. I know in Esri, NASA uses it and changed the base map to the moon or Mars or something. And so for them, that's actually a very concretely useful function. But yeah, there's all kinds of different applications that you could change it to. I think that also goes to the open source version. If you have something that you specifically need, you can just take it and do whatever you want with it. Make it your own.
Just saying, I know a lot of geologists are getting excited when they heard you say bathymetry maps, and they're probably licking their rocks right now.
So, I guess some of this comes back to the fact that you've built this on top of QGIS, and so then you get to utilize pretty much everything that's in there. But because now you start talking about base maps, but even then different layers and so on. Are people able to connect to web feature services or web map services and bring those in?
So not yet, but that is something we're actively working on. Right now, to bring data in, we only support PostGIS. We're also working on supporting WMS, and just because we know that this will probably be important for some enterprises, MS SQL, and
yeah, I was thinking of that earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, we want it to be as sort of accessible as possible, because we look at this as a way to, you already have so much data, we don't need to help you create more data. We need a way to sort of visualize it and work with it. So having all these integrations is important to us. Right now it's just PostGIS, but we're working on all these other places you could get it from.
So this gets me thinking a little bit, because they say a WMS is just like a kind of almost like an image layer, right? It doesn't actually have the features there, so you can't necessarily say do an intersect join or something utilizing that. But and I don't know if anyone has this or if you all looked at it, but is there a way for it to almost use a computer vision type thing where it could actually see where this, let's just say weather, where this storm cell, if I want to know when this storm cell intersects Fort Bend County, which again, I'm pretty sure weather.com is doing that for me already, but let's just say I want to do it myself. Could you actually bring in a WMS and could it actually kind of see that this red cell, intersected with it, even though it doesn't actually have the feature available to it?
Absolutely. So this is probably at the frontier of the stuff we're working on. We do think that, so there's kind of a mix. So the new Google models, I think in particular, are very good at this kind of reasoning. And we do want to integrate that in. Integrating computer vision is just generally something we really want to do. One of the features, we haven't released it yet. We actually haven't announced it yet. So I guess this is the first time it'll be out there. One of the features we really want to work on is if you have like a SharePoint or some other sort of database of documents that relate to spatial data, be able to combine those. So the example we're sort of working with is, imagine you have a spatial database of dams, and then you have a SharePoint full of dam reports, like inspection reports. And you want to know what dams have in the past 3 months, had reports of too many plants growing around them. You could then just search that in and it could combine this technically not spatial data, but it's effectively spatial data because it relates to an actual point, and sort of query them together.
Back to an asset.
Yeah, I think once you start sort of pushing LLMs to their limits, with all this different data, you can do a lot. So whether it be computer vision of the, raster data with the vector data, or searching through documents and combining that with spatial data, I think there's a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah, I think it'd be hugely beneficial because I think, say, getting back to geologists, I think we had some different maps where they were mapping like different geological properties across the acreage. But like if you were to take a raster or a point layer of that, it would crash the memory, the RAM on your computer. But we would expose it as a WMS and people could kind of see like the gradients and so on. But then if you were able to just like publish like the gradient, but then the computer vision was able to actually interpret like if it had the scale and it could kind of like utilize just that image, and identify that, certain things, that'd be extremely powerful, where you don't need to load as much data to get the benefit computationally.
Yeah. And I think that's also a big benefit of both LLMs and, you were joking earlier, you can self-host it. It's no big deal. But if you're doing that and you put it on a server or you use our hosted version, which is on the server, it's just so much easier than using QGIS. Over the past month and a half, since we launched Mundi, I've been only using that. I haven't gone into QGIS. And I recently opened QGIS again, and I forgot it takes 3 minutes to open and another minute to open up a new project. And it's just so intensive on your computer, and so slow that I think, using these web-based solutions is just a much more pleasant experience. And until pretty recently, WebGIS, I think, had this connotation with weak. But if you start getting these sort of powerful LLM features, and having it be sort of a full function GIS, the more you can offload from your desktop and put, in the cloud, it's just so much easier, so much more pleasant.
What if I want to drag in a shapefile or a KMZ or any of the, are we there yet with that? Or?
Yeah. We
I did that this morning
because it's still
that was on the demo.
Yeah, you can upload a shapefile. Technically, right now you would have to have it zipped with all the sidecar files, but you can do it. I think you can upload KMZ. I know you can do GeoJSON. You can upload GeoTIFFs. Right now, I think there's like a 500 megabyte limit on the uploads, which obviously we're going to make larger. But we figure the way we approach things is get it working somewhat and then get it working fully. So we have it working somewhat where you can upload smaller shapefiles or smaller GeoJSONs or whatnot. And then probably in a week or two, it'll be upload whatever shapefile you got or whatever, raster file you got.
Half a gig is pretty good. Like for now,
yeah. You'd be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. We get some, start asking people, how big is it? They say, will this be a problem? We say, how big is it? And they're like, well, each file. So when I have to send it to the client, I purchase a hard drive, a 5 terabyte hard drive, and then I mail it to them. I said, well, one day we'll get it there. But
I mean, even that's, you're always going to be at the mercy of, upload speeds and throughput and everything,
I did want to ask Michael, where do you think, what's the like current state of the computer vision side, and where do you see it kind of going? Because like I mentioned, when I told my geologist that we were having the podcast and he started looking at this stuff, he's like, oh, well, if I give it a map and it's got the scale and it can understand it, like, could it just digitize the full thing for me? Right. And there are so many of these, like, whether it's plat maps or geological maps or structure map, like there are so many of these where it's, it's a good map, but it's just not, it's either digital in a PDF or it's not digital. But if it was, and it had all the shape files and everything associated with it, it would be infinitely more useful than it currently is sitting in a filing cabinet.
Right. Yeah. I think it's I don't know if it currently would work. I bet with a lot of tuning, you could get the current offerings to work. But with the rate of progress with these LLMs, I don't think it'll be long until you can do that. Which hurts as someone who has invested quite a lot of time making a map digitizer. But I do think that these a combination of both the LLMs and their sort of inherent capabilities. So the Google models, I think, are specifically good at segmenting things. But there's also sort of the Facebook segment anything models. I suspect they're working on a better version of that. But even as it stands now, it's pretty good. So I don't think right now you could just upload something and with a mixture of segment anything and Gemini, get out a full vector representation. But I do think it's not long until you could. But I think what's more interesting about this is whether or not it's just sort of the computer vision in the LLM or enriching the vector files, uploading the vector version of the map and uploading the raster and having it automatically populate all of the vectors with the data from the original map. Because that's a whole other process after you trace it, is adding all the other information. And I do think LLMs very soon will be able to basically automate that part.
Yeah, no, I think that's the computer vision stuff is just so wild and it's moving so fast and it's getting so good at a lot of things that, I absolutely agree with you that's going to happen at some point. And that's the craziest part is like today is the worst they're going to be at it. And they're still pretty good. And so,
I'm almost certain that GPT-5 is coming out this week. Definitely by the end of the month, but I'm pretty sure it's this week. And I can't wait to see how they do with that. With their new, I don't know if you saw, they released an open source model.
I deployed it this morning.
And really, we tried deploying it and it crashed my co-founder's computer. And he has a pretty nice computer. But I think just at least in theory that they made something open source that is that good that I think GPT-5 will be crazy. And I imagine right after they do that, because it's how Google operates, they'll release something that's super crazy. They're not fast enough to do it themselves first, but they'll eventually get there with something really, really good. Anthropic is moving fast. I think all of them are moving so fast that it's hard to stay on top of.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I got the 7B model working on Olama on my laptop. I did not try I know my laptop won't run the 120 version, but it is. It is on Azure Studio. I saw it's on Grok now. Everyone is getting it updated on their lists and stuff. So I haven't really messed with it.
Yeah, I do think that's where it's most powerful is for enterprises that don't want to use, for their data security, they're either uncomfortable or there's just some policy that won't let them use OpenAI or use, Anthropic or whatever. Being able to use your sort of Azure, AWS, or GCP account and just put the 120B on it and have an O4 mini level LLM running locally, I think that's where it's most useful. And I think there's a lot of applications where that will Where before someone would have said, an IT person would say, I would love to use this. It seems useful, but we just can't. Now can say, actually, maybe we can. We don't have these same security issues as we did before.
Yeah, no, self-hosting is going to be a very fascinating thing to see how that plays out, especially at the enterprise side moving forward.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to think through where some of my headaches or heartache has been on the GIS side. I mean, it's I think just like a lot of the reprojection. I mean, you get things coming from like multiple different coordinate systems, or you get this is in feet and I want to convert it to lat longs and vice versa. It's just so I mean, I guess it's kind of maybe beating a dead horse, but it's just I guess QGIS handles that beautifully because that's what it does. And
QGIS handles it, and LLMs are specifically good at like keeping full track of what needs to be done. And so, in an example that I use, I say I have I guess a projection is in feet, and I say buffer this line 2 kilometers, and it just knows it has to reproject it to something that uses kilometers, and then can do it correctly. Or it doesn't have to reproject, but it knows it has to do this sort of calculation to turn 2 kilometers into feet. It's just very good at keeping track of everything that needs to happen to keep the GIS work running smoothly. So that plus, as I said, QGIS is perfect at all this stuff. I think it just makes it's a perfect combination. It keeps track of everything that needs to be done without you having to do it.
Yeah, and I think there's another use case, and again, I'm not sure how. I guess it would just start cranking on QGIS, and it would depend on how fast I could process it all. But like I know one thing that I know a ton of people have always had to do is like, all right, what's the spacing between one well, to the nearest well on either side of it? But then giving it the prompt, I guess you have to prompt it in such a way that like take each well and find any well that intersects it, at least, or like if you find the nearest well to the east or west of it that's overlaps by 50% or more, and all these things. But like I'd be interested to see if it could actually output almost a table of that by iterating over a data set like that. Because I know there's a lot of people who have their Python scripts or SQL Spatial or whatever it is that's done that or tried to do it. But I'd be curious to take a crack at it and see how well it handled it or how long it would take.
Yeah, I think it would probably be good at it. Something that we have recently fixed, it now is able to sort of do these multi-step, sort of more complex reasoning tasks. So it can write complex SQL and then run, a series of geoprocessing algorithms. So one of the examples that I was testing was find how many of these polygons are within 2 kilometers of this line. And so it knows, okay, it needs to sort of filter for the right line, and then it needs to buffer it, and then it needs to find the intersection of the buffer, and it's able to sort of keep track of each step. So I do think it would be able to do it. In terms of specific oil and gas work, what I think will be interesting is seeing how much you need to prompt the LLM and how much it just understands, okay, this person is doing, a request about oil wells. This is specifically what they mean if they say how much do they overlap, versus how much do you need to give it more specific guidance of here's what I mean by overlap, here's how you should sort of approach it, and then taking it from there.
I think the prompting is a good thing to bring up here, and that's kind of where I want to go with it too. Is like, all right, how much? Like, I mean, imagine you've got some system prompts behind the scenes that kind of this all gets fed into, so it has a ton of context. But then, do you also allow maybe like a customer or a user to upload like their own, like, say you have cursor files, and different folks have it now where like they could upload their own custom, system prompt that enhances what you have, and then it could make their querying better or easier as well.
Yeah. We don't do that yet, but it is something we want to do. We actually, and I'm very curious to hear what you think cursor for oil and gas looks like. We take a lot of inspiration from cursor. Something we do want to add is custom prompting. And so we do have a very long, complex system prompt that we just keep adding to and keep iterating on. And then obviously the user can put in a prompt per request. So with each thing they want to do, they can add more to the prompt. But we do want to add something that lets you always have this be part of your prompt and be sort of more custom to what you're doing. But I'm curious, as someone who uses Cursor and is so sort of in depth with oil and gas, what do you think Cursor for either Cursor for GIS or Cursor for the oil and gas industry looks like? It's a big inspiration for us.
Start with John. I mean, he's kind of sort of building it.
I was gonna say I'll take it on the high level. Bobby probably has a lot more experience taking it on the GIS specific piece, but to me, it's an interesting question because there are so many incumbent softwares out there. I mean, we have multiple or document management softwares. We have multiple reservoir engineering softwares, multiple production softwares, there's all this stuff, right? And so I personally am curious to see how much of it is kind of architected similar to how y'all have, where it's like, leave the infrastructure that's there and let's just talk to it in an easier way for most users. The experts can still go into their tools and use their stuff, but Susie in accounting, who doesn't know shit about GIS, just needs this one little thing so that she can get her job done and she can go use that, right? I think the hardest part with our industry, which I know it's not unique, but is just the diversity of the data, right? You have everything from, paper. There's so much paper documentation. That's what we focus on at Collide is enterprise RAG, right? So basically just being able to search through your entire document set and find the answer that you need as quickly as possible. And then we're starting to build some automations and stuff off of that based off different kind of repetitive tasks that engineers have to do on a daily basis. But then you've got, that's just the text data, right? There's embedded within that text data is images, diagrams, plots, plats, all kinds of maps, all this other, rich text type stuff. And then we've got all the machine data. So you've got just giant repositories of SCADA data that have been running for decades that have tons of information in them and no one knows, that's where our industry, in my opinion, really started kind of adopting the AI stuff is around, long-term time series, preventative maintenance or failure predictions or things like, that type of stuff. And, this to me is just another iteration of that. It's like, hey, we needed actual AI and machine learning for understanding all of this numeric data because as humans, we can't understand all of it because there's so much. It's the same thing with text. It's like we just have a shit ton of text data, and the easiest way for us to use that data is by layering AI on top of it so we can get to the answer as quickly as possible. So it's tricky from that perspective. Then you've got all the accounting systems and all the other fun crap on the back end. And so it's, I don't know that there's going to be like one stop shop, at least anytime soon. But I do think there are going to be a lot of these tools where it's like, hey, we integrate with all your geospatial data and anyone in the company, no matter how skilled you are or not, can use it to get answers. And I think it's going to be the same thing on, the text side. Hopefully, I believe we'll be the company that does that. And then, there's already been lots of companies doing this on the true data machine learning side for a decade plus now. And so it's going to be very fascinating to see how all of this stuff starts interacting and layering on top of each other, especially with MCPs and all the other fun stuff that's coming about with this. And so it's that was a long-winded way of saying nothing, but I'll turn Bobby over. Bobby probably has a lot more thoughts on the GIS specific piece.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he was even asking GIS specific, but just kind of how in oil and gas, like Cursor for oil and gas. I mean, and I don't know if we're speaking about Cursor specifically or just kind of that concept of being able to ask questions of it. But I mean, I'm thinking from the software side, like I'm a huge proponent of like, again, and IT people will probably, heads will explode. But like, I mean, I think every, tech forward, Python savvy reservoir, or petroleum engineer should have Cursor or something similar at their disposal.
We're seeing clients do that already. And like with their drilling and completion engineers, just giving them Cursor so they can write simple Python scripts to solve their problems. It's like, it's not production code. It's not getting public. It's not enterprise grade, but it solves my problem. And I think I completely agree with you, Bobby. That's
just, set them loose. And whether it's, even like if there's a production tech, whatever, like we had a lot of use cases where we just need a simple CRUD app, and it's like, all right, Power Apps is fine, but it's kind of a pain in the ass. But why can't, you can literally go into Cursor right now. Probably I could tell it, I need a simple CRUD app that works on mobile and desktop. Here's the 5 fields that I need. This one's a date. This one's here. Here's a list of wells. Put this in the drop down, and so that you have some data validation on it. And the values in this field can't be less than 1,000 and greater than 10,000. Whatever it is. And it would generate that immediately. And it would probably use Bootstrap, and it would look fine. It'd be better than anything. And you do that in 10 minutes. And I can go on Lovable, do that, and it writes it right into Supabase, which is Postgres, and we're off to the races. But to a whole nother level, John, I'm thinking why couldn't, say John and I worked together at a company that was streaming basically pressure data for frac side of it. When we did a lot of what were called DFITs or mini fracs, and I'm like, John, why couldn't we have taken, any or a bunch of those DFIT papers from SPE, provided those as context to an LLM and say, write this in Rust so it's really damn fast too. And if I give you columns for basically date, time, and pressure, write me something that identifies when closure happens based on these 3 methods. I'd be very interested to see how it goes. I guess I could go do that here in 5 minutes when we're done. But no, it'd be really interesting. It's just stuff like that where you've got all this, and again, John and them have pulled in and probably a lot of technical papers that they have access to, and just transcripts. I think transcripts are a huge thing too. You have all this, these conversational data that happens on the morning operational meeting, and it's like, well, that also gets, someone said that, the Jim Bob 5H, took a pressure kick when they were drilling through it. But then does anyone remember that 5 years later when they're drilling a well adjacent? And so
not in the notes, not in the procedures, not in any of the drilling reports, but it was said in a conversation. And yeah, I'm going to get on a soapbox about this for a minute because our industry needs to do this. It's I don't care how concerned you are about the security privacy piece of this. Yes, that's a thing. But all of the information that you're trying to retain from all these people retiring and leaving the industry gets said in those meetings. It's not written down anywhere. It's not put in a book. It's not put in a report. It gets said verbally. And so it's the technology is so good right now with text, audio to text, that it is a shame that more people aren't using transcript data for a lot of their stuff, because it is just so simple. Honestly, it is a couple lines of code.
Yeah, but I guess you say you take that example I talked about that ties it back to a geospatial aspect. I mentioned a well. We know that this well has a lat long or even a deviation survey that is a geospatial. It's a polygon or a line string or whatever. And then we also actually have a 3-dimensional aspect, because if they said, well, when we hit this ash bed or whatever it is at 10,000 feet, now you actually have a 3-dimensional geospatial aspect to this, that you can go right from, a verbal text thing right into something that's usable data that is super important, potentially years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I totally agree. I think, even if you have, I think people, it's not to say they shouldn't be concerned about the security of it, but there's so many ways you can do any of this stuff without, running into crazy security issues. No one is saying stream it straight to, put it on the internet. There are ways to do it.
Put it in your public S3 bucket.
I have a friend who works at a company that is very concerned about their data. And I think there was a fight over whether or not they could use Microsoft Copilot. And I had to explain to them, Microsoft makes so much money. They don't care what we're doing. They're not going to take it, and they're going to keep it safe. Well, Microsoft has its own problems now, I guess. But they don't care what we're doing. It's perfectly safe to use GitHub Copilot or whatever it may be. Or even if it's not, there's so many local model options that if you're drilling for oil, you probably have enough money to get a laptop with a GPU on it. You'll be fine. There's just so many ways around.
Get out of here with your logic.
is crazy. But it's also interesting, what you said about the voice data being geospatial. I do think that's another thing that the LLMs will unlock is there's so much. If something refers to a point on the Earth, it should be geospatial. It's not a shapefile, but that description is geospatial. It refers to something.
It's all related.
Yeah, it refers to a point. And I think LLMs will make it a lot easier to, work with that.
Oh man, lots of fun stuff here. Just real quick, and I don't want you to say anything that's going to get you in trouble or expose any kind of IP or anything like that. But what is y'all's kind of stack look like? What cloud are y'all running on, and what are y'all running under the hood?
That's a good question. So
again, you can say I choose not to answer because
I would happily answer. We it's just that I don't write any of our code, so I don't know a lot of these answers. I will say I do know we use a lot of OpenAI's models. We've tried a lot of the different ones, and we've just found that the OpenAI models are the best ones for what we're doing. But beyond that, I think we've built Mundi on a lot of open source geospatial technology, just because it is itself open source, so it kind of made sense. But I think the most important sort of decision we make in a day-to-day about our tech stack is the model. And right now, we think that OpenAI's reasoning models are the best. But yeah, we're always looking at what's new. I imagine when GPT-5 comes out, we're going to look at that. And then when Anthropic and Google put out their own, versions, we'll look at that too. But for now, it's OpenAI.
Cool. Oh, it's funny because it's like I can ask that question and you can tell me you're using OpenAI for the models, but then it's like internally, I also know you're using a bunch of other stuff, just like we are, right? And so it's funny to just to see what everyone ends up using GPT for the production stuff in most cases. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's very good. It works best for, working with these geospatial queries. They're pretty complex. And so we wanted something that can sort of go from just keep using the example I've been using, how many of these polygons are within 2 kilometers of this line? That needs to be broken down into a series of steps and then sort of handled sequentially. And it's not like the most simple, it's not just like a question and answer thing. And we've just found that the GPT models are best at that.
Well, cool. Let's, we'll go ahead and jump into the exciting speed round to close this out, but definitely appreciate you chatting with us about this stuff today, Michael. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been great. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
So at the end, we just pepper you with random questions, just short answers, nothing crazy.
Okay.
But what is your favorite cloud provider?
Favorite cloud provider? AWS.
It is pretty ubiquitous. I always ask people their favorite restaurants in Houston, but all right. I actually haven't been to LA, but I know like it's on our list of places to go, especially if we're going to go take the kids to Disney World, but or Disneyland. But if I get out to LA, I'm sure there's a lot of things that what's your best like under the radar restaurant in LA?
Under the radar restaurant in LA, easily Via's Tacos in Highland Park, the original location. Is really good. I can't recommend it highly enough. And like the guy that operates it is awesome. It's just a great place. I would say if you go to LA, you have to go.
All right, sweet. Noted.
I like that. What is your favorite non-OpenAI model?
Favorite non-OpenAI model? Claude 4 Sonnet.
That's a good answer. Is that your cursor default?
I think it is. I think we use that pretty heavily. I know if a lot of people at companies that are not at all cost conscious use Opus, but we found that Sonnet is almost exactly as good for a fraction of the price.
Same.
I'll say with the kind of the softer questions. What's favorite place to go on vacation?
Favorite place to go on vacation? Recently, I've been loving San Diego. I think it's, especially now that I'm in San Francisco, which is a lot colder than the rest of California. San Diego is just such a nice, pleasant town. Everyone's happy because they live in San Diego. It's delicious food. It's just such a nice place. San Diego.
What is the coolest thing about being YC, like a YC company?
I'd say the coolest is how helpful other companies are. And if another YC founder either, works on something related to what you're doing, they'll talk to you about it. If they know someone that might be useful, you ask, they'll intro you. It's just such an unbelievable network. It unlocks a lot of opportunities that I think just being, a startup, a general startup, that would not be available to you.
What's your favorite mapping service not named Mundi?
Favorite mapping service not named Mundi? Does QGIS count? I think QGIS, it is astonishing how feature complete it is and that more people don't use it. It's not to say that S3 doesn't offer things that QGIS, has. They do a lot of other stuff. But if all you need to do is make a professional map, QGIS does everything and it's free. You can just download it. And it works on Mac. That highly underrated aspect of desktop software is that I can use it and I don't need to go out and buy a PC.
It's a good answer.
Yeah. I don't think about that because I basically get railroaded in Windows for the most part. But because of that, because pretty much everything else just all the software in oil and gas for the most part runs on Windows. I mean, I remember actually the laptop that I used for consulting, I bought originally it was a Dell. It had Ubuntu on it. I thought it was going to be cool and get a Linux laptop. And then I realized it was useless for most of the things I was actually going to consult on, and quickly switched it over to Windows. And here we are. So
that's awesome, Michael. I appreciate it. Where can people find you? How do they get in touch if they want to reach out or learn a little bit more?
If you want to see what we're doing, Mundi.ai, Mundi.ai. Is our landing page. You can email me at michael@buntinglabs.com. I guess that's buntinglabs.com. We're Bunting Labs on LinkedIn, Michael Egan on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to my co-founder, CTO, ask technical questions, I'll give him a shout out. Brendan Ashworth on LinkedIn. We're pretty easy to find, pretty responsive to email. Reach out with anything you want.
Perfect, man. We appreciate it, guys. Check them out. I know we do a lot of mapping, and like I said, I came across these guys just on LinkedIn through my AI perfected LinkedIn algorithm, and I wanted to have them on the show because I thought they'd be interesting and potentially valuable to you guys. So hope y'all check them out. Michael, thank you again. Bobby, as always, appreciate it. I'll see you this afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.